Hola, bienvenidos. Welcome. Buenas noches, buenas tardes, good evening. My name is Abelardo de la Peña Jr. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications with La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. Welcome you to En Casa con La Plaza. That's La Plaza's virtual programming. We've been at it since April of 2020. Ya mero 2 años, almost 2 years. Presentations, demonstrations, conversations, and performances from our home to yours. If you're on Zoom, thank you for joining us. Use the chat feature to ask questions, to shout outs, let us know where you're viewing from. Use the Q&A feature as well. We may take your questions during or most likely after the discussion. Joining us on Facebook, thank you so much. Use the comment section to ask questions, make comments, let us know where you're viewing from as well. All right. We want to thank February's En Casa sponsors, CVS Health and Aetna, Union Pacific Foundation, Kaiser Permanente. Hope you all are vaccinated. Funding has also been provided by the California Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, as well as the Institute of Museum and Library Services for the advancement, support, and empowerment of America's museums, libraries, and related organizations. Before we get started, let me give you an update of what's going on at La Plaza. We've been open since like last July. Every day except Tuesday from noon to 5 p.m. during the week and 10 to 5 on weekends. La Tienda gift store is also open. All of our exhibitions are on display. LA starts here. Calle Principal, Patriotism and Conflict, our latest exhibition, which we'll be talking about during the discussion. Also, Frank Romero is going to the 1984 Olympics, and this is the last week to view Carlos Almaraz' Evolution of Form. It's on our second floor. An incredible exhibition. You got to come and check it out. Also, we just opened this week La Plaza Cocina. It's our museum, which is dedicated to the best cuisine in the world, Mexican food. It's open from Monday through Friday, 12 to 5, right across the street there on Spring Street at La Plaza Village. So that's it for the update. Now we're going to let me introduce to you Esperanza Sanchez. She's an LA-based curator, public historian, currently the associate curator at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. She's held archival and curatorial and educational positions at the Autry, the Museum of Latin American Art, Cal State University Northridge. She holds a Master of Arts in History with a focus on public history and Bachelor of Arts in History with the emphasis on U.S., Europe, and Latin American foreign relations, and a minor in sociology, both from Cal State Northridge. And most importantly, she's the curator of Patriotism and Conflict, our current exhibition there on the first floor of La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. So let's welcome Esperanza Sanchez. Please join us, Esperanza.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you again, Abelardo, for the wonderful introduction. It's always a pleasure to be here. And thank you all for joining us tonight. As Abelardo mentioned, we are having this discussion because it is a discussion that we're very excited to talk about. We are joined tonight by 3B Collective, 5 gentlemen who who have extensive history and a lot of experience in the arts. And we want to highlight not only their story, but also their contribution into patriotism and conflict. As Abelardo mentioned, this exhibition has been open at La Plaza. We opened on November 5th of 2021, which we're very excited about. Originally, it was supposed to open on August 28th, 2020, a day before the 50th anniversary. But because of COVID and because of other situations, we had to hold on and open the exhibition a year later, which is really exciting because we ended up working with so many other artists and included more history into the exhibition and oral histories as well. And so we'll be able to discuss that tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you all to 3B Collective. 3B Collective is a group of artists and designers that, along with producing individual works, create site-specific installation, public artworks, and murals. All of the collective members come from immigrant and indigenous families and are committed to providing a platform for inclusive works for which encourage pride and recognition of the different facets in our communities. The collective work addresses not only social inequities by creating public works that will not be possible not only as individuals, but they're sharing these resources and providing peer support and mentorship. So I want to go ahead and welcome our 5 members from 3B Collective. We have Alfredo Diaz. We also have Aaron Estrada, Michael K., Oscar Magañez, and Gustavo Martinez. Hello, everybody. How's it going?
Hello.
Hello. So tonight we're going to be highlighting not only the fact that we are talking about patriotism and conflict, which again, I've been researching since March 2019, but one of the great treats is that we got to work with 3B Collective, who also did the 50th anniversary of the Chicano moratorium, which is located in Whittier and East Los Angeles, which we're very excited about because they got to do the rendering and update a lot of the iconography and a lot of the history to fit to the narrative of this exhibition, which is wonderful because in LA Plaza, we understand that the LA used to be the mural capital of the world. It no longer is, but however, we still continue to have these murals. La Plaza is located across the street from the freeway, which has a bunch of these murals that were created for the 1984 Olympics. And then of course, Abelardo mentioned that we do have the painting of Frank Romero going to the Olympics. So I hope everyone will be able to see that. But the way this is structured is we are going to ask a couple of questions about 3B's work, but first we're going to kind of start off and introduce you all to the individual works that the artists are doing, and then go, of course, talk about their work together as a collective. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with Alfredo. So Alfredo, in your work, you reflect a lot about culture and time and how an object can be functional to an artifact of colonization. Why is it so important for us to talk about these subjects, and especially why do you talk about this in your work?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting the collective to speak tonight and to be a part of the show. I think it means a lot to us. So just wanted to say that. But also I really like the question. I think it sort of takes me to a point where when I went back to Oaxaca, or to Mexico actually, a few years back after not being there for about 15 years. So almost half my lifetime that I was away from being in Mexico after, going to Oaxaca often in my childhood with my parents. And so when I went back, I ended up visiting the Anthropological Museum in Mexico City. And I saw this display, or this install, that reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen from when I was a kid. And it sort of had this impact on me, where there was this schism in time, where it almost felt like I was in both places at once, in the kitchen and in an institution, and looking at an object that was considered an artifact that looked just like the objects that my grandma made beans or coffee in, and these objects that were functional to essentially feeding herself and her family. So that moment sort of was a turning point, I think, for the way that I began to see not only objects in institutions, but myself in institutions. I had been a student for years. I went back to school when I was, I think, 25 years old, and had been in school for, I think, about 9 years straight. So, placing myself in these institutions sort of made me feel a relationship to that same object that reminded me of being in Mexico for the first time in years, and also my grandmother's kitchen. But also working backwards, and seeing a lot of objects that are labeled unknown artist or unknown person, or I think that sort of also propels me. I tend to work backwards from that, knowing that let's say in the future, I wouldn't want the objects that are being created by artists today to be by unknown artists. So it's important for me to make sure that my work sort of combats this this idea of these institutional spaces that not only create these displays, or these curate these shows that feel like artifacts, that aren't necessarily functional. I think that's something that I tend to address a lot of my work is how do I make something that sort of continues from that, where not only does it begin to generate new objects or new things for culture, but also questions the idea of functionality. At what point do we begin to consider something an artifact or retire it from its function? And I think, going back to the relationship of the body and the object, I think, growing as we get older, as I get older, seeing, the hardworking parents that I have, and them, slowly starting to, their bodies changing, they're not performing as well, and then, things don't function the same, and so I think that's where the time starts to come into play, where it's very much present, it's very much in front of us, and in the room as something that has been currently generated.
Thank you so much, Alfredo, for telling us and also sharing your family connections and your roots too to Oaxaca. I think it's very important and how you illustrate that in your work. And I hope that the audience was able to be captivated by not only your story, but also by your works visually. I think you really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and move forward over to Aaron. I wanted to ask you, a lot of your works does address the complex histories of Black and Brown communities, especially the bodies, but can you tell us a little bit more about how you use your medium to not only bring the subject matter about these communities to the forefront?
Yeah, definitely. So with my art practice, I tend to use a lot of different mediums, whether it be painting, installation, sculpture, but it all comes down to the idea of the body again. Similar to what Fredo was saying, the idea of the body and also the idea of like archiving material, the history of material and like what gets recorded and who's able to record. So more or less with my work, it becomes present to be like a ethnographic archive that's constantly growing from the material that I gather, whether it be from friends, family, and loved ones, and also just like the community that I'm part of and that I grew up in, which is associated within the Black and Brown communities. So I tend to use a lot of material that is usually found in those communities, whether it be razor wire, but also just the idea of like recuerdos and like memories and amulets being passed down from generations. So the idea of like putting something on your body and having like preciousness to it, and then continuing that that lineage of like where the object comes from and how it's associated to a certain person. But also incorporate the idea of music and also sound within my work. Just paying acknowledgement to like the idea of like of growing up in the morning and hearing your family in the kitchen playing music before you even brush your teeth. Just the idea of like family household environment and also incorporating that into the work.
That's great. Thank you so much, Aaron, for sharing that. And I do like that you bring up that you use a lot of these objects and materials that are very in our communities, but are very cherished by people in so many ways. And the fact that you use music and other cultural traditions in your artwork really emphasize that. And thank you for sharing your work and also the reason why you do this. I'm going to go ahead and move forward and ask Gustavo. So you use a lot of photography and film that focuses on the displacement of Mexican and Latinx communities. And I wanted to ask, how to use film and video, not only as a medium, but to discuss these matters even further?
So my parents' experience and my community was fundamental in shaping my aesthetic vision. I began with the violence of gentrification occurring throughout the neighborhood. There was accelerated structural renovations and immediate decrease in crime. And although they were an improvement, they were also the prerequisite for the displacement of low-income brown and Black residents. So I started documenting what was happening in Inglewood around 2010. And several of the images I have of this time are the only pieces that remain of the buildings and the original landscape. So it did cause the displacement of people. Now there's retail stores, condominiums, and football stadiums. And I've been working closely with South Los Angeles and seeing how that cycle is being perpetuated again. So I have a few images that I could show of this time.
Go ahead.
Trying to see if I could open it. It actually, okay, I'm sharing the screen now. So I have a few drone shots of these changes
And
all
these,
happening within these borders of South Los Angeles and Inglewood. So this is recent. All of these are recent. Within like the last year, I've been really using the drone to see the world in a different way and see how it changes just the environment in itself, but how that is affecting the community. I have a few more. I think they might be similar. And then these were from years before. So this home was actually this one got burned down, and it's also in transition. So this was 10 years ago. And then this doesn't exist anymore. This is now the metro train. So I was seeing how this train was actually this connecting line of how this train is being built, but it's also displacing the people that are in this community slowly.
Hey Gustavo, I think when you're switching slides, it stopped switching, so we're still seeing the overview of the development.
Oh, let's see. I have a lot of windows, so I would have to. Oh, okay, got it. Here they are. So these are like the homes that have been changing. This was 10 years ago. This is a train. So this doesn't exist anymore. This was in 2010. And then these are the drone shots of the condominiums from the top. This is what it was during the transition. But prior to this, it was a hospital. And then these are also in the drone shots. So I've been really focusing on how this change is affecting the neighborhood and hopefully find a way to disrupt the cycle by learning to see the community and its changes. But it's really important for me to really understand what's going on, because Black and brown people shouldn't be displaced from their communities when there's these developments happening. They should be for the people that have been living in these neighborhoods for a long time.
thank you, Gustavo, for sharing those images and for making that connection to how these things are happening in Inglewood. As we know, you now have this large stadium there that was constructed for both, I believe, the Chargers and the Rams, and you're demonstrating how the neighborhood has changed. And of course, it affected the communities that lived there, but also it displaced you as well in the process, correct?
Yeah, I had to move to South LA, and I could really see how it connects me to 10 years ago. I could see how that cycle is slowly going to kind of continue again in connection to colonialism too, and taking over land and property.
Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing those images, and I hope that you continue to document this work, not only just in your photography and film, but maybe even possibility oral histories as well. We would love to be in any way instrumental to that as well, because it's very important histories.
Mhm. Thank you.
Of course. And I'm gonna go ahead and move forward over to ask a question over to Oscar. So a lot of your work shows cultural and social elements of growing up in a Mexican American household. And throughout your career, you reflect a lot on the diverse histories of communities here in Los Angeles and Southern California. So can you share with us not only your vision in creating these work, but how that reflects and constitutes what you consider to be an American?
That's quite a question, right? I think very early on in my career, well, I mean, just going back a little bit more, I worked as a graphic designer for 15 years, and that really led me to really start thinking about semiotic symbols, cultural iconography, how we give meaning to different, everything from like colors, when we think about a flag, or how we use representation and gives kind of, I mean, it's easy to think about when we think about like these symbols have to do with like nationalism or even hyper-nationalism, all the way back to, different types of even fascism, right? Like what is that history of design that has aided in giving meaning and really history to so many different things. But for me, it was the history of protest, right? Like the symbols that came along with the Chicano movement, the murals from the community, because it wasn't just Mexican American household. It was an entire community. In San Gabriel Valley, so many different of the cities were primarily Mexicanos and Chicanos, and so to me that was important to start to kind of pick that apart and understand how we like what was it that about these histories that were to be celebrated, but also what were the trappings of some of these things, right? What were the histories that we were seeing within this iconography that weren't being really analyzed, where we could analyze, why are we reliving so many of the different histories, where we could celebrate something, or a person, but why are we still fighting for civil rights, that or why are we going backwards with some of these things, especially in current times. So to me it was really important to use these things, these objects and artworks, to have these conversations about the histories. What is it like, where so many, and this is a thing about symbols, and again, we're realizing how important it is to be able to communicate in a nonverbal language also, right? Where uh you know cross, or things that cross over, so many different language barriers, which we always knew, in this continent, where we had so many different cultures, so many different, major civilizations that spoke, thousands of different dialects. We use symbols to communicate, and to me that was really important, and to understand there's a lineage there within like the codexes, and the very little bit of things that are left, that use these symbols to then go forward and think about my community in the same way. Like when things are being destroyed, where there's displacement, what are these cultural iconographies that we could really use to understand as devices of history, like pride, and understanding that a Chicano, through definition, is a Mexican American. Like there is no Chicanos without colonization, without the moving of the border, because of the Mexican American War. All of these things is what created the Chicano, and so it's inherently an American creation. So to me, it was really important to continue talking about that, regardless of whatever it is that goes on politically, or if my community's been destroyed, through gentrification, and the culture is being dispersed in different ways. It still is a place that I inhabit, just like during colonial times, when people were still creating codexes, telling these histories. I draw these correlations between that, and I think it's something that is uniquely American. But at this point, it's something that was decentralized, right? So there was so many things that had to do with that, of course, with symbols that is an decentralization, right? Where racism really thrives on this. But within that is also this ability to easily transplant things, right? Where we have Chicanos in Japan, you know, we have Chicanos in Mexico, we have Chicanos in Vietnam, right? Like this, there's this aesthetic, this history, so many different things that are being taken into different places and really being celebrated, and the nuances of it really being integrated by you know, different people in different countries. So to me, it's really important to understand that that has its beginnings in the Mexican American War and colonialism, and to draw those histories within the work.
Definitely. Thank you, Oscar, for sharing that. And I think it is very important to show not only the symbolism that you attach to these histories, but also even looking at the Codex X. I think that's something that has definitely come about, especially during the Chicana and Chicano art movement. It's something that was really emphasized. And I think now more people are starting to look into the actual histories and culture behind it, but on top of it, the symbolism. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to go ahead and move over to Michael. In your work, you've been working with 3B Collective now for a time with them. And how do you connect with the community through the artwork that you're creating with 3B?
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael. Yeah, so I think my time with the collective, because I am not an LA native, I think it's definitely been humbling, being able to hear about the culture and learning about the community through the members, just having a completely different perspective. I remember moving here in 2009 and experiencing a completely different, you know, version of LA, going through college and, you know, graduating and meeting the members and learning a lot about the injustices, a lot about the racism that was going on in LA that I wasn't really aware of. But overall, like my experience as being a child of immigrants and going through a lot of the discrimination and racism during 9/11 was a very easy way for me to connect and empathize with what a lot of the people in LA were going through, you know.
Definitely agree. Thank you for sharing that, Michael, and demonstrating how the work here, you learn a lot about LA, but you also make those personal connections and also kind of have an outlet to bring up stories and how you dealt with racism too with the rest of the members here in 3B. So I really appreciate it. Thank you guys all for sharing your individual artworks and stories and how you're all intertwined together. And I want to kind of talk about it because it's so important to talk about both your individual works, but also together as a collective, because again, I have worked with Oscar before when I curated, co-curated with Aaron Curtis, the previous senior curator when we did Ya Basta, the East LA walkouts, and the power of protest. So I was familiar with his work, but it wasn't until we were doing this work for the Chicano moratorium, and I think after the 50th anniversary, and as I was having conversation with our current senior curator, Karen Cruz, we were having discussions about how we can be more involved and bring more artists into our exhibition space, especially because for us, murals are very important. It's something that I grew up with in LA. Growing up in West Adams, I was taking the 10 freeway, the 110, and it was just these wonderful murals that were created in the 1980s. And then of course, being introduced to the murals that were in East LA that was telling a lot of these histories and a lot of community-based activism and histories. And so we wanted to kind of do that with La Plaza. And this is where you all had this opportunity to do this for the 50th anniversary, to do that in East LA and commemorate the 50th anniversary. And so it was wonderful that we were able to work with you all and bring you into the space more than anything. So I kind of want to segue into that and how 3B Collective was formed. I mean, what is the reason, what motivated you all to kind of join forces and decide to work together? Because it's always really hard to get a group of artists to have the same or a similar vision and work to do this work together.
So I think it was 2017 when we first decided to work together. as and at the time I think we didn't really know it was going to be what it is today. We knew that, you know, after graduating from UCLA, which 4 of us went graduated from there, you know, we were we were kind of left in this question of, you know, like what next, or what now. And so Oscar had reached out to us to go and install this piece for LAX Art Gallery. So I think that sort of gave us something to grab onto. It was a task, you know, that we had to be like, you know, can we, like, let's work together, let's, you know, be productive together, and also sort of this like common ground or commonality of, you know, actually like working labor, you know. I reflect on it, and it makes sense, I think, to gravitate towards, you know, a group like this, you know, based on our backgrounds and essentially our culture, our LA culture. You know, I know Oscar has worked on this for his thesis about, you know, how, you know, these groups of Black and brown people are criminalized. So, you know, reflecting on that, and you know, even growing up, and you know, having my parents sort of guide my brothers and I, you know, to try to steer us away from, you know, all these spaces, all these groups, and all these gangs, and you know, things that sort of reflect on it. Which is funny, you know, because in the end, you know, the first thing that we did as a group was essentially spray paint some walls, which is, you know, so that was in 2017, and that's really how the collective got formed, through you know, executing these jobs, and learning how to work together, and actually coming together to have conversations about what we're really interested in doing.
And that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad to hear that you're all having constant conversations about the work you want to do and the subject matter you kind of want to put out for not only for people to see visually, but also to kind of tackle on these issues, especially because they have been coming more to the forefront more recently in the last couple of years. But with more reason, a group of artists to do this together is always wonderful. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because as you were all talking about not only your work, but what you've done in 2017, here in this situation, just last year, you all did the 50th anniversary Chicano moratorium. And I kind of wanted to talk about why was it important to commemorate that event, but also who approached you to creating this mural for the Whittier Boulevard on East LA?
I could take that. So the 50th anniversary was, of course, really important. I mean, you know, the Chicano moratorium, even though it isn't talked about widely, you know, in the history books, it is one of the more important events in the civil rights movement, especially when it came to Chicanos and Mexicanos in the Southwest. But in as in the lead up to it, Philip Rodriguez, the filmmaker, reached out to us, or his team did. A couple of people that we worked with from his team, which approached us, and Philip Rodriguez had been working on the documentary for Ruben Salazar, The Man in the Middle is the documentary. And he was working with an educational aspect, like some workshops along with different high schools for the 50th anniversary, to educate people on not just Ruben Salazar, but the 50th, you know, the actual anniversary, and the really why it was important to teach this within the communities in LA. And so they originally had asked us to do a much smaller piece that was going to be done on the record store that is where why can't I think of the name right now of the
Silver
bar,
Dollar.
the Silver Dollar. So where the Silver Dollar used to be, and they ended up growing into this much bigger piece as we worked with them, which we're very happy that you know we were able to do it. And it's become, you know, kind of a point of pride. It's something that's been owned by the community, and it was really nice when we were painting it, because even as it was going up, the community would come out and, you know, give us thumbs up and like, a fist in the air and offer us waters because it just happened to be one of the hottest, like the hottest 4 days in, in LA. And it was really just beautiful being part of that, like where the community was really proud of it. And, some people would say finally, and people would come in, with their children and talk about that day, sharing what it was like because they had all been there. And so it was really important to us that we were able to tap into that and really, as a collective, I think that was probably the perfect model for what it is that we've been wanting to do, right? Where we're commemorating something, where we're creating this mnemonic device for these very important historical events to be able to then talk about it with the next generation, right? And so we're very happy that that we're able to execute this piece. And then when you approached us about redoing the piece, making that connection with really what was going on in the community. Why was there the Chicano moratorium, right? Where everybody remembers, how that day ended with Ruben Salazar being killed and a few other people. But what was the lead up to it? With what was going on in Vietnam, that disproportionate amount of Mexicanos and Chicanos, that were being killed, vast, disproportionate levels for the amount of people that were enlisted. And some of those, kind of injustices were continuing to very recent times where people are very much being recruited from East LA to go into the military, and these kind of endless wars that have been going on. That's been going on my entire life, and even before that. So that's really nice to have been able to tie that in with the current show at La Plaza.
Definitely. Thank you, Oscar, for sharing that, because it is very important. I mean, we know that the history is always important, and a lot of murals in LA, especially when it comes to Chicanos and Chicanas, are telling these histories. But I think it's so important that you guys did this work, and then to even emphasize that not only did it happen during the 50th anniversary, but the fact that you guys were out there in the hot sun trying to get this mural done and trying to paint and get this all situated before the 50th anniversary. And it's nice that you're talking about this, because in many ways, my next question is to kind of ask you guys more about, like, what do you enjoy about mural making and doing the artwork? Like, what is that really just pulls at your heartstrings in order to do this work?
Well, I guess for me, I would say just being able to do our research, and also be in conversation with the community that we're going to be working in. So just research about the type of iconography that we use, the images, the stories, but also just the people within that community. What is it that they are more likely in necessity of? What type of resources do they need? And what type of stories have not been told from the community that have been whitewashed and forgotten about. So just incorporating more of a dialogue with the work, that's something that excites me. But also just being there, like Oscar was saying, being able to work on the mural and then have people pass by and spark up a conversation. That's something that's always great, and that's something that come across the work as well.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that, Aaron, because it is very important. I mean, when I see these murals too, I always feel a lot of pride and a lot of joy seeing that our community are being represented, our histories are being shown, a lot of our work is being represented, not only in our communities, but throughout LA. But also something that Karen also kind of emphasized with me while we were having the discussion, she also enjoys that murals are open to everyone. It allows everyone to kind of come in. There's not a designated time or business hours. It's just open to anyone to just enjoy and learn. So it's nice that you guys are bringing in those stories and those dialogues and putting it in your murals, which is very important, which is always good too, because I kind of want to emphasize not only the work that you guys have been doing as a mural, but also the fact that you guys just had an exhibition opened up most recently called Highways and Byways, which is which was at the Residency Art Gallery in Englewood. And you all looked at how mega developments continue to displace communities. And I wanted to kind of ask, why is it so essential for you guys to show this work, not only with the connection of gentrification and the environmental issues, but also the indigenous traditions and the Los Angeles styles and the work that you all did together as 3B and as individuals?
I think that sort of goes back to this idea that Oscar was talking about earlier about colonization, and understanding, what these actions of erasure actually mean, or the threat that it has on the community and the culture. And so, understanding that and understanding that history, we understand the importance of what it is to combat it and to be able to have the platforms to speak about it. I think that's something that the collective sort of strives for, is to utilize the platforms that we have built as individuals to collectively come and use that as a larger stage to speak to these things, to speak to the invasive species, or the architecture that stomps us out, or the churches built on top of the pyramids, to speak about that past, and and realize that this is sort of what's happening, still happening now. This erasure. I mean, we still have things like book burnings recently, and so it's important to know that it's not in the past. It's not something that happened already. It's very much happening now, and it's very much still something that pushes back against us. And to go back to that, to the Whittier mural, having the acknowledgement from the community is very important. Having those conversations and those spaces to step out of the studio, step out of essentially the classrooms, go and literally be in the streets and speaking to those who will appreciate it the most. Those who don't necessarily have access to the spaces to view art, the spaces to view paintings, murals. This is something that I think it's important for every member, for to tell these stories. These one of the most strongest memories I have about that mural, that sort of carried over to this work, was this person who was taking his kids around to see murals, and that's how he was teaching their kids to read history. And so I think this show was sort of reflective on that, and how do we start to put into this visual language, these visual paintings, the history that we know, that we want to speak to.
If I could just touch on that as well for a little bit, because something that Fredo was saying, as far as the history, in the past, and there's something very, very much Eurocentric in the way we're taught at looking at time, where we're taught about time being just this linear progression forward, and because of that, we're not able to really learn a lot of lessons from the past, where it's just we're always progressing, right? There's always this push forward, but really we have to think about things as cycles, right? And if we were able to think of things as cycles, then we could understand and look to the past and say, okay, what's coming next, right? Like what is this, this amount of time, right? Whether it's only one life cycle or a few generations, we're able to start being able to see how the world works. And we're really, in this modern kind of, paved over, cemented, with the freeways and highways and the LA River, whatever it is, we really have lost touch about, what are the natural cycles of things, and we're really disconnected from it. And that's, carries into our histories, the way we're looking at things, right? And so we're in a time again where we've reached the point where people are trying to erase histories for whatever purpose, right? Or where there's these multiple worldviews that people don't want to accept, right? And so we come from a lineage of people accepting multiple worldviews, understanding those multiple worldviews, and it comes from everything from the way we speak, where not everything that exists can be explained in English, right? And so there's there's this arrogance really in the way that things are taught. And so that's some of the histories that we really want to bring into this, and understanding that they're very much alive now, because if we're able to change the way that we see the past, I think we could effectively change, the present. And then because of that, we could then effectively change the future.
No, that's great. Thank you, Oscar, for speaking about that and making that connection, especially when you're talking about erasures of histories and how development really does contribute to that. And I actually would like to touch upon that with both Gustavo and Michael, because here you have this large work that you created. That was what in residency art gallery. And I kind of want to get Gustavo's and Michael's perspective when you all created this together. So for example, like Gustavo, you had mentioned a lot about redevelopment and you do a lot of the film and photography. Can you talk to us a little bit about this work and why is it important to kind of bring in and talk about the freeways when it comes to the development of cities?
Right. I'm in school at the moment. At UCSD. I didn't get a chance to work on this specific painting, but I have been. I'm really critical of the freeway and how it's really close to South LA, where it's like this. It dissects through South LA, and just thinking about the built environment and how the smog and the crime that happens along the freeways, it's all really interconnected, or it really affects the community in terms of like the environmental effects or health issues, even to it being a physical health, but also mental health because of just living in a space where the resources aren't really being sort of allocated towards that community. So I did really notice a lot of how the freeway was interconnected with resources and sort of this effect that it has on the community even till now. And I seen that connection with the show that happened in San Diego and thinking about the Coronado Bridge and the freeways out there and how that also happened in a similar way to communities of color. So I do notice how the freeway affects South LA, and it continues until this day.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that, Gustavo. And I also want to add Michael into the mix here too, because Michael, from what I remembered, you are actually from Northern California. Is that correct? And so you've migrated down to Los Angeles. So what is your perspective while creating these works here with Reby?
Yeah, I think with this piece in particular, what really kind of points out to me or resonates with me is especially with noticing so much of the graffiti and the tagging in LA recently. I know that it's a very cyclical thing, or it goes through cycles of there's a lot of artwork and then it gets taken down. But you know, recently because of the pandemic, I think I've just been noticing so much artwork that's been going up, and I just think that to me symbolically, the bridge really represents a platform for community members and people who haven't had access to art growing up. Like this is their way of being able to have an experience with art, being creative, collaborating with people, you know, and just this is like the only thing they have accessible as art in some of the communities. This is their first interaction with art, and it kind of also to me represents a bit of a thrill in the process of making work that does go on these places. I just think like also the people who make just graph work on in just certain areas of the bridges is just incredible, like how they're able to maneuver and get the work up in those certain areas, and just like how they're not, you know, a lot of these artists are not being recognized or getting the same kind of recognition that some people do in fine art. So to me, that's kind of where it symbolically is touching.
Definitely. Thank you, Michael, and thank you all for sharing your perspectives of your work here with Reby Collective. And I really do value that. And thank you, Michael, for emphasizing the objects that you've been noticing, the artwork that's been coming up all through LA, which is great because I wanted to ask you all together, and of course it depends on who wants to go first, but what's next for 3B Collective? What should we anticipate for you guys that you're going to be doing? I guess how do I say this? What advice would you have for young artists who are interested in not only doing their work, but maybe working together as a group as well?
Well, as far as what's next, I think right now we're definitely been aiming towards public works. And this is going back to the idea of combating the erasure of murals, the erasure of history, making sure that our works are recognized as something that should be permanent, not just our works, but our cultural image, our cultural history to be preserved in these institutions that we attended. You know, we've been participating in these institutions, universities. And so, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, moving forward, we not only understand the history of the erasure of murals and artworks, but that we combat it in a way where it becomes, it feels permanent. You know, I think that the idea of permanency and murals are sort of, you know, sort of clash very often. So I think that's sort of for the collectives moving towards. And as far as, and I think advice for me, for any artist is young or older, I think it's patience is the game, I think.
Thank you, Alfredo, for sharing that. Anyone else want to add to what Alfredo also mentioned as well?
Yeah, I would like to add, just going back to the idea of like public works, having the work be accessible to the public as well. So accessibility, thinking more about who's able to view the work and who's able to access the work, whether it be through the idea of like going back to the idea of how to read a mural, like referencing codexes, and also just having like more nuanced conversation within the work that may only be accessible for the community it's for. That's something that's also a part of the work. Just going back to the idea of like the idea of like how art is usually taught within history of being Eurocentric view, and then where you have to already know the history within like the art worldview. I guess what we would be doing was taking the work and interweaving histories and different acknowledgements of the community that isn't really acknowledged within like the art history view.
Definitely, thank you for mentioning that, because also something that I've been noticing too is that wherever you guys are located, you constantly do bring in the indigenous perspective and you acknowledge the people that were there before people migrated to Los Angeles or other places, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So one example of that would be like in Stanislaus. So we had a 3B project that was in a public library for Cal State Stanislaus, in which they did a new renovation for, and then we paid respects to the indigenous community, which were the Yokuts of that area in the San Joaquin Valley, and also just the different immigrant farm laborers that were there, also paying acknowledgement to the Japanese farm workers as well.
That's great. Thank you, Aaron. Anybody else? Any last minute add-ons that you want to add before we wrap it up and we pass it all over to Abelardo?
Well, I just want to thank you, Esperanza. I mean, and congratulate you on the great show. And again, thank you for including us and for having us as guests tonight. Yeah, and we look forward to any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you. And also thank you all for working with us too and dedicating the time and effort to not only get to know us here at La Plaza and the work that we're doing for the exhibition, but also to do this mural and really highlight a lot of the themes that were not only in the exhibition, but also that were very important for you guys in the mural. And we actually do have one question. It comes from Gabriela Gutierrez. Have y'all considered doing work with Santa Ana and, I'm gonna butcher it, but Purepecha artists?
I
That's
think
her question.
definitely if the opportunity arises, we wouldn't be shy towards it. We definitely want to do as many projects as we can with as many communities and specifically indigenous groups. The one that's in my background is the first mural we actually did, and it was in Oaxaca. And it was in collaboration with La Pistola, who is a collective based in Oaxaca, and that's where my family's from. So I think that's why this indigenous perspective sort of comes into play a lot with us. We understand that history. So I mean, Santa Ana would be, amazing. Purepecha, and you're just working with anybody, any indigenous culture that if we're down, we're down.
That's great. Anyone else, or we can wrap it up and pass it over to Abelardo. Anyone else have anything else they want to add to it?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Esperanza and the 3B Collective for joining us tonight. Just finally, individually, do any of you have any projects coming up? Any shows? Any gallery shows? Anything you'd like to let our viewers know what's going on? This is your opportunity. Come on, a little self promotion.
Aaron, you're part of
Yeah.
Felix.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be showing some work with Residency Gallery at Felix Art Fair. So it's gonna be some work at the Hollywood Hotel, and then also at Residency Art Gallery, and then the collective will also be showing work as well, some panel works that we've done together at Residency as well.
All right, and when's that taking place?
From the 17th to the 23rd for Felix. But the gallery will be open by appointment for a certain duration past Felix.
All right, thank you. All right,
And
well, go ahead.
oh, and right down the street from La Plaza, we're going to be working on a large-scale installation at the Hilda Solis First Care Village. So we're going to be doing all the artwork for that just on the other side of Union Station, a couple blocks down close to Homeboy Industries. So that's our next kind of big project that we're working on.
And when do you start working on that?
We're already working on the design part of it. So and then we have a couple other big projects that are in the works, but we can't talk about them yet. So
yeah, we're on the research part, research, gathering images.
Well, cool. That sounds exciting. I know with the situation with the unhoused, lots of things are being promoted and a lot of controversy there, but we know that at least in certain quarters they are trying to help out with the unhoused and giving them a place to stay, and that Hilda Solis Center is one of them. So we appreciate that. Just to get a hold of you guys individually or collectively, what's the best way?
3bcollective.com is our website, and also our Instagram account has links to all our individual accounts. So it's at 3B Collective.
All right, there you go. On Zoom, I just put down the link to the 3bcollective.com, and also here goes let's see if I could find, okay, here you go. I was ready. Here's the Instagram page as well. And let's not forget, just about a month or two ago, we had the 3B Collective in the LA Times in their Image magazine. So you got to check out that article. Nice photos. So here
yes.
there's the link to that. You guys got to check out a lot of good questions, a lot of good answers, which were posed to you by the writer Julissa James. All right, there you go. Well, thank you, Gustavo. Michael, Aaron, Alfredo, and Oscar Magenas, and especially Esperanza. Thank you for, of course, bringing 3B into the fold. And for all of you out there, if you haven't seen it yet, you got to check out the mural there at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. We have it. You don't even have to walk into the La Plaza. You could just stroll down Main Street and check it out day or night. But we really want you to come and check out the exhibition, which includes a work by Oscar right there in the gallery itself. So that goes on until June. Patriotism and Conflict, Fighting for Country y Comunidad. Exhibition curated by Esperanza Sanchez herself. Okay, well, with that, any final thoughts from anybody? Come on, let's hear it.
Put us on the spot.
All right, no problem. Okay,
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Just to let everybody know, En Casa continues for the rest of the week. We have on Friday coming up Dan Guerrero with his happy hour every other Friday at 7 o'clock. He shows up with an incredible guest. This week he's going to have Herbert Sigüenza, of course, 1/3 of culture class, but also a playwright. He's doing a one-man show based on the life of Pablo Picasso, and he's a visual artist himself. It's going to be an interesting conversation, and Dan brings out some incredible questions and some provocative answers as well. Next week, we have, of course, En Casa continues on Monday with our cooking demonstrations, Love and Chocolate with Maite Gomez Rejon, just in time for Valentine's Day. Something a little bit different next Wednesday at 7 o'clock, Living Mindfully, Finding Calm with Rosa Maria Segura, Director of Insight in Action, which she'll be talking about meditation, involving breathing methods, guided imagery, and other practices to relax the body and mind and help reduce stress, which is really something we all need. And then finally, next Friday, Giovanni Blanco, a musician and filmmaker, who'll be talking about unbreakable positivity through these uncertain times. So with that, we want to thank everybody for joining us on En Casa con la Plaza, our sponsors, of course, Aetna, CVS Health, Union Pacific Foundation, Kaiser Permanente, California Humanities, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. If you came in a little bit late to this En Casa con la Plaza session, we've recorded it. We're going to post it on our YouTube page at La Plaza LA. It's also, of course, on our Facebook page at La Plaza LA, and then our website, lapca.org, where you could catch all of our En Casa con la Plaza sessions, including a couple others that Esperanza has been kind enough to join us as the co-host. Just last week, we did one on Latino Vietnam vets with Dr. Tomas Sandoval. It's an interesting conversation. You got to check it out on our website, our YouTube page, and our Facebook page. Y con eso, muy buenas noches a todos. Thank you for joining us. 3B Collective, we'll see you soon. Esperanza, we'll see you sooner. All right.
Yeah.
Buenas noches a todos. Bye-bye.